Hi, I'm Roger. So, I wanted to do a video for a while about anthro characters and talk about it with a guest. But as I started to plan that, I realized I need to explore what cartoon characters are in general. Heck, explore the entire concept of the abstractification of the human form, or whatever you want to call it. I don't think there's a nice word for it, as far as I know. Because man, we humans sure love depicting humans in our art, and we also sure love doing it weirdly sometimes. So in this video I wanted to explore, try to figure out my personal philosophy, my personal definition of this entire stylization, abstractification process, whatever you want to call it. Making cartoons, basically. Now, while I'll be touching a few scientific subjects and generally agree to opinions here and there, this video is mostly my personal little philosophy, so I'm playing a bit fast and loose with the general agreed history here. After all, we're dealing with art and the murky depths of psychology here, so exact rocket science doesn't quite work here all the time. What I'm trying to say is, take this video as a philosophy video, not a factual science one. So, the abstractification of reality, particularly the human form. I need to establish two themes here that I think are central. So, two introductions. First, long time ago, I was riding my bicycle home, and then I fell on my face. And it was incredible! With high speeds, I was launched from the saddle, and I just went phew through the air, crashing spectacularly to the ground. Blood! Haha, wow, man! You should have been there! Actually, no, you shouldn't have been there, because it would have looked very boring. Then it was just me and a bicycle. Blop. Because when you fall, the brain starts doing things, pumping adrenaline, making sure you can act as much as possible short amount of time that you're falling, so you can move your body in the right position, hopefully. So your brain works in overdrive, and things go slower and faster, more dramatically, as you suddenly need to do a million things in a fraction of a second in order to fall reasonably safe. So in your brain, the fall is spectacular. In the real world, So now we have two versions of the truth and how this event unfolded. We have the real world, the real context where my fall is entirely depending on laws of physics, laws of friction, speed, time, impact, body strength, the facts, the things you'd see if you were an emotionless camera floating in the air. And we have the truth that took place in my brain, where I magically flew into the air for a minute and landed spectacularly. So which of those two truths is relevant? Which is the true and proper truth? Well, obviously the laws of physics one. If you were a neutral bystander, that's what you have seen. So if I write a story or make a movie about this event, Roger falls on his face, the movie! This is the perspective I should be going for, right? So everything makes sense, everything works correctly, as it should in the real world. Well, it depends. After all, well, this is what really happened. This is not how I experienced it. So if the point of the movie is to get people to experience what it's like to have this amazing and world-changing accident, then perhaps the deformed brain version is actually closer to the truth on an emotional, a personal, a psychological level. What does a person look like running away from an explosion? This is a guy running away from an explosion. Yeah, but that running pose is inefficient, and legs don't bend that way, and the face is all distorted. No, do some research, you shitty artist. Can't you fucking look something up for 5 seconds on Google? Ask a fitness expert. This is the most efficient way of running. This is how you should be running away from an explosion. Sure, in the world of science, but whoa, this looks very lame. In a movie, this runner is jogging in the park, not escaping a big explosion. And of course, real smartasses will say even this doesn't represent reality. No. This is what an actual person looks like who tried to run away from an explosion. Poof. Realistic, yes. Exciting for a movie, no. Sorry, I still take this guy. Brain versus reality. Alright, introduction 2. Let's talk about art. Now, I don't have any official knowledge of history of art, so this is a bit of an amateur interpretation. Anyway, to me, a big key to understanding art is to understand that the world around us is too complicated for our pathetic human brains to fully capture everything we see. Like, you know how old and even current 3D video games have all these tricks to make the graphics look better than the hardware is really capable of pulling off? Like using 2D sprites, or making textures blurry in the background, or only loading in sections of the level instead of the whole thing at once. The same with our human brain. Most of us don't have the brain capacity to fully capture everything around us, so our brain is using trickery to filter out irrelevant details and highlight things that are important. Some of those tricks you can screw around with, like when you do all those eye trick things with the perspective and seeing the old lady and the young woman and all that. So your brain is programmed to give special treatment to certain visual cues. Like if you were a caveman in the jungle and your brain gives everything around you the same level of thought, you'd react too slow. As soon as you recognize teeth, the brain screams, "Monster!" and you start running. If you're carefully analyzing where the teeth are while still standing in the potential range of the danger, you might be dead. So, let's say we're now an important painter in the Middle Ages, painting realistic portraits of important people. You have to do a job to paint the young daughter of some business guy, and right before the deadline you accidentally screw up and make her eyes a little too big. Uh-oh, we're in trouble, and no time left to fix it. Our client comes in, sees it, and likes it. Despite us screwing up, he somehow thinks we captured her personality even better, and we get a raise. Hooray! But what happened? By accidentally distorting reality a bit, we painting something much better than reality. We painted some kind of super reality. A reality that doesn't merely capture what we see with our eyes, but one where we capture what we see with our brains. We triggered one of those brain cheat codes. Big open eyes, it does something to our brain. Connects to the soul, communicates innocence, honesty, stuff. See, there's a thing with our brain. I believe in psychology it's called the in-group advantage, which means that you're always better in recognizing people, their emotions, their details way better in a group you're acquainted with. Or, heck, it happens to races too. You know, all black, Asian, white people all look the same to me kind of thought process. Not so much specifically racism, it's the cross-race effect. Types of people, and animals for that matter. Steph in the zoo can recognize individual animals instantly while they all look the same for a dummy like me. Your brain seems to process them differently than strangers. Basically, and this is my personal little cartoony explanation of this phenomenon, my own interpretation, I interpret that when you meet a new person for the first time, the brain doesn't know what to specifically focus on yet and sees everything at the same time. The brain still needs to take it all in and figure out if this is a friend, enemy, sex, food, idiot, whatever. But the more you know this person and your brain has put this person to some sort of category in your head, this person's family or a lover or a coworker or a classmate, whatever, the brain doesn't need to figure out the person anymore, and it leaves it with more energy to focus on other things. It starts focusing more on specific details so this person can be quickly identified, which is why you can sometimes immediately spot people you know out of a crowd by super trivial details. Or you can recognize when someone is in emotional distress quicker because your brain can recognize subtle clues in the face quicker when you're familiar with these people. It's like your own brain is already exaggerating, characterizing this person in your own head, subconsciously. Of course, you don't literally see people as a caricature, it's subconscious. So you can imagine, if you're an artist, being able to master this thought process in your art can be invaluable. Not just for caricature artists, but toning it down and being more subtle about it, it can strengthen realistic portraits as well. After all, reality has this nasty tendency to disappoint our brains. And who are the ones commissioning art? Important kings, generals, captains, and the church. Because, we're still talking about painters in the old times. The church wants you to paint Jesus Christ. And what the heck is this weird little man? Some kind of Arabic Jew? A humble little carpenter? No. We want Jesus Christ, you moron. This guy. The guy who can't enter a town without having to apologize for instantly turning the entire water supply into exquisite wine by his mere majestic presence. Capturing reality is nice and all, but what if you can capture this super reality where landscapes are just a little more landscapier, heroes are a little more heroicer, important gentlemen are just a little more important to your gentlemen to your So as time went by, eventually the photo camera was invented and we noticed a change in interest by large portions of artists. They became less and less interested in capturing reality. After all, what's the point in spending hours for intense work mastering reality if you can just snap a picture? And instead, all kinds of abstract art started to pop up everywhere. More and more groups of artists no longer wanted to capture reality, they wanted to capture the brain, try and capture the concept of speed or the concept of fear. This may look like a children's drawing, but hot damn, now this is what fear looks like. Bam! Now, of course, hashtags, not all artists. Photography by itself inspired new artists. I'm not saying all artists went into this abstract route. It's artists, they do what they please. Just that this direction, the chase after the abstract capturing of the brain, became increasingly more interesting to a larger group of artists. So there you get stuff like Piet Mondriaan's art, and we're all like, ha! I could make this in Microsoft Paint when I was 5 years old too. This moronic painter has no skill, he could never paint something like this. Except, yeah, he can. He did when he was 19 years old. That's the thing, when you can master reality early on, it becomes less interesting to pursue, and they go look for something different. Mondrian wanted to capture the essence of a tree, get the tree back to its basic mathematical components, into a more pure, clean shape. So an early attempt of creating a cartoon, basically. So he starts with this. No, that's a tree. And then we go here. Still a tree. And then to this. Yeah. And then this. No. And so he keeps simplifying the world until we get to, this. Now, I have to admit I don't possess the understanding of math and art enough to get this meaning, but, that's why he's a master, and I'm not at his post, but, Basically, what I'm getting at is that around this time, cartoons started to pop up in existence, and with cartoons, I mean genuinely planned and deliberately designed cartoons, and not just old-timey failed attempts to capture reality. It's my personal interpretation that a cartoon is essentially when you take this super reality, all the tricks and cheats that artists have learned to master to capture the mind, but then take reality away, because it's just a waste of time. Bye. Basically, a cartoon is a collection of all these tricks and cheats removed from reality and instead used to create an entirely new form of reality that operates entirely on the logic of the human brain. Of course, cartoons have degrees, so you have more pure cartoons and more stylistic, semi-real artwork, so it's not an on and off switch for reality, it's more a degradation, depending on what style you're going for. Whew, so we finally got to the core of this thing. Brain logic, cheat code artwork. Because cartoon art is so super easy to duplicate, it's hard for people to remember that the original design of cartoons is based on a very long road of psychological experiments and tricks, and that there's almost a science to this whole thing. Old cartoonists had a very distinct reasoning behind every one of those seemingly careless and easy shapes. Take a baby, break it apart into its core components that our brain focuses on, and then add those elements to a pig, and the result is an horrible, incomprehensible abomination, or, this cute little piggy cartoon. Oh. Funny how our brain can take apart reality and reassemble its components into a new order, a new context, a new arrangement, and we get an entirely different object and a whole new meaning out of it. Now, there are several consequences or effects this abstraction can have. For one, to tie my two interests together, I tend to feel that the more stylistic and abstract your artwork is, the more you're encouraged to view the artwork from a brain perspective. Cartoons, the abstract, is a direct communication from brain to brain. Take emotion, for example. I might feel extremely happy from the inside, but before my initial emotion is sent out into the world, my brain censors itself. I'm an adult. I can't suddenly scream happily in public. I look like a moron. Compose yourself, man. Your own body softs the emotion. I may scream of anger inside, but by the time it gets outside, it's, awkward. And then it's for other people to interpret that emotion, so my emotion goes through several filters before I communicated it to someone else. My own censorship, my body's ability to communicate, and the other's ability to recognize it, among others. Cartoons, on the other hand, they skip the entire reality thing. They're pure. They're entirely made out of emotion, shyness, happiness, greed. Instant translation between intent, how it feels, what it is, right into the audience brain. One of the reasons why kids like cartoons. Kids lack the life experience to recognize emotions and intents from other people and are way more familiar with the core emotion from inside. Also, those with mental disabilities will have a hard time recognizing people's faces and emotions in public. They find cartoons more relatable. Outside of that, it's also more satisfying. We folks love smileys and memes to communicate with each other on the internet. Stupid internet meme can convey your inner pure emotions way more intense and clean than your stupid awkward real face. More efficient and direct. It's just missing the weight and credibility of a real emotion, so it's more comedic. Focus! Can't help but notice we're getting a little more ADHD in movies these days. Hey, this story takes place in Australia, but those are clearly New Zealand trees. Hey, it's supposed to be spring, but the tree clearly looks like it's summer. Hey, the sun's position shows it's 2 in the afternoon, not supposed to be noon. Tree, forest, characters, focus. With all these OCD detail obsessions these days, some people practically need baby graphics just to stay on the ball. I mean, not saying all movies should do this, just saying it's nice to have an option to shut down this manner of movie consuming if that benefits this specific movie. Another side effect of this abstractification of humans, the decrease of judgment. For example, take me, realistic me. When we look at reality, the real world, we tend to observe things from a more consequence perspective, cause and effect. Well, at least when we're meeting new people, strangers. With people you're familiar with, it's a different story, but I get to that. So with strangers, we all have a standard in our heads, what a human should be like. And when looking at new people, we make up our minds what to think of them based on how much and how differently they distort our default expectations. So, me, I'm a beast, messy beard. What's wrong with those teeth? Things that are a distortion of how a proper human should be, and therefore lead to judgment. This man lacks discipline, self-respect, hygiene, untrustworthy, but not dangerous. Of course, it can also have positive results, depending on what your standards of default persons are. Look at those sharp eyes, that keen intellect, that wonderful thing, wow! Regardless, judgment, cause and effect. However, abstractify me, turn me into a cartoon, and you get a switch in how to approach this person. While starting with the uncanny valley where everything looks worse, but looking better when you go on. A cartoon is much less a distortion of a default shape. A cartoon is a construct. It's deliberately man-made to look the way it does. So instead of looking at the visual cues of a cartoon as cause and effect, instead it merely becomes an illustration of his personality. Cartoon Roger isn't fat because he lacks self-control, he's fat because that's Roger, that's him, wacky, goofy old Roger. And abstractify him further, like turning him into an anthro, let's say an elephant. And the element of judgment is gone even more so. Elephants aren't obese, elephants are just elephants, they just are. No longer are your physical attributes rooted in reality, cause and effect, but instead they're just you, or the character. The character looks like this because this sums up what he is, why he is. An extremely stylized cartoon is essentially a collection of symbolic imagery that conjure up an idea, a personality, a soul. Turn yourself into a furry, and you're not judged anymore. Oh wait, you get judged even more so. But as part of a group instead of as an individual. Hooray! When you cartoonify a person, it's almost like you already present the version your brain would turn the person into after you knew this person for a long time and already passed judgment, turning a stranger immediately into a friend, enemy, or family member. Look at a cartoon and usually you can immediately tell what kind of person it is, what voice it should have, what action it should participate in, turning strangers immediately into people you've known for a long time. No wonder children and the innocent like them. They're instant best friends, just add water. And no wonder alpha men and women, people extremely depending on judging and assessing people's character and being suspicious of strangers, probably feel very uncomfortable around cartoons. They take away your ability to scan a person and make up your own mind if they're dangerous or useful, like how security or business people would scan strangers. I admit I never saw test score, so this is just a crazy hypothesis of mine, though I'd love to see some kind of test score and what kind of people like cartoons and what occupations they have. So yeah, the more abstract the figure, the more it becomes like a physical embodiment of an attitude, a soul, and some real-life elements start becoming increasingly less relevant. When you simplify a human being all the way into a Mickey Mouse figure, all of a sudden age, race, heck, even gender become more flexible and trivial. Just give him a bow and lashes and boom, it's girl. Mickey's first and foremost an attitude, an energy. Oh boy, gee willikers! More so than an age, a race of physical strength. So give him the right props and context, and you can turn him into anything you want. His emotional attitude is the only relevant consistency. Utterly moldable. As a little aside, sometimes I wonder if this is one of the potential reasons why people can be lured into the furry fandom, particularly when you have identity problems, struggling with your sexuality or gender and such. I suppose it's comfortable to identify with more abstract interpretations of humanity that are more moldable and directly representative of the inner you, while sidestepping the bits about your physical or mental disabilities or complexities. I mean, not saying that this is always the case or that there's a direct correlation between furry fandom and being unhappy with yourself. I'm just saying it could be one potential thing that's happening. Okay, whatever, moving on. So, cartoons and laws of physics, or lack thereof. One thing I'm understanding more and more about cartoons is that very much they do have to obey rules in order to work and connect with the audience. Perhaps not so much from reality, laws of physics, laws of science. Cartoons can survive insane things in the final logic of reality. There's a sense of seeming randomness about them. However, cartoons are very much strictly tied to the laws of your brain. Even when cartoons survive insane things and perform incredible physical feats, A successful cartoon still needs to feel right. Its distortion of reality still needs to make sense on some deep subconscious level. I always approach cartoons like it's a dream. Yeah, dreams are random, I suppose, but they still have an origin. At least in my interpretation of dreams, they're like a distortion of your memories, your fears, your interpretation of the world. It's your brain defragmentating itself. The naked and from the class dream is that ultimate visual representation of hyper self-awareness you're going through when in the real world you're suddenly in the spotlights. Makes a little sense realistically, but it's very recognizable in a sense of symbolism. That type of logic. Symbolically representing subconscious fears and such. Wile E. Coyote running off the edge, standing in the air, and only then falling. Realistically, that doesn't make sense. The laws of physics don't work that way, but mentally, this is a very recognizable sensation. To me, at least, I know all about being so obsessively pursuing something, so entirely enthralled with a task that you become blind for impending signs of danger and only realizing slowly and step by step the horrible reality that starts seeping in. Roadrunner runs to a painting, while the Coyote runs through the painting. Makes no sense, perhaps, but it immediately captures that mental suspicion that we all have, that if every human being on Earth were given the exact same skills, intelligence, and possibilities and equipment, the others will still magically get impossible results, while we still somehow fail spectacularly just because the universe hates you. Laws of physics be damned, these stupid cartoons are a perfect portrayal of all those little fears and suspicions bouncing in our heads, and good cartoonists have a fine instinct for this stuff. In a way, they capture reality just as much as a real picture. Just not real reality, but brain reality. And considering we're always trapped in our own heads, even when looking at reality, this might be even more recognizable to some to begin with. Cartoons represent a part of the soul, and they're tied to very specific brain laws, very specific personalities. Donald Duck is all about the ego feeling it's treated unfair, with the resulting anger making it worse. Goofy's all about that clumsy, wide-eyed, naive optimism. Bugs Bunny is all about trying to be a fair and decent person, but dealing with such pig-headed, moronic authority figures that you want nothing more but to turn into the superhuman gesture that bends time and space to have those morons eat their own medicine. Well, they can break all the laws of nature that they want. They can't easily break the laws of that personality they possess, they represent. Bugs Bunny should never start a fight. He's the righteous victim fighting back. And it'll take some extreme circumstances before Goofy loses his patience or innocence, or Donald stops being consumed by his ego and self-gratification. Although, admittingly, their personalities are often toned down whenever they appear in more layered, serious stories like the Scrooge comics and such. But still, it needs to be there. It's what they represent. The less they tie to reality and consequences, the more they're tied to that personality soul. Now, I mostly focus on cartoons, but of course there's gradations. Superhero comics and anime are leaning more toward realism in art style and in narrative, ignoring the parts where there's giant robots and demons coming out of all over the place. Of course, that's supposed to be weird within the logic of the story. I mean, when they present a slice of normal life in their calm moments, obviously. So, back to the point. One thing I noticed with, say, anime is that the art style is super realistic with near-perfect recreations of the environments and the human body and its proportions. Well, usually. The only real abstract part of anime are the faces. And this makes sense when you look at the narrative. Anime stories are very grounded in reality and stay close to the real world. Though, again, when it's presenting real life and not, before the big giant robots and demons show up, obviously. The only thing really abstract about it are the emotions. Just show a sliced world and everything looks very realistic, but have a character be emotional, and then you get all the fire backgrounds. People spin around, explode, scream, fly up in the air. Emotions are hyper-exaggerated. Fights are way more based on the mentality of the characters than real physical strength. It's not so much about who has the most muscle mass, it's about who has the strongest convictions, the strongest motivation, the strongest personality, the one who's the most righteous. You could almost say that an anime is entirely realistic and live action, with only the emotions and mentality of the characters operating on cartoon and brain logic. The fact that it's mostly the faces that make it look cartoony instead of just stylized realism seems to communicate that idea. And superheroes. Very realistic and grounded, compared to traditional cartoons, that is. But there's something about superheroes that they just need to have this weird, colorful, or at least abstract-looking uniform when performing their superheroic feats. It's almost like as if their superhero costumes are like the cartoon character. Like as if Clark Kent is a real person operating on realistic laws, but as soon as he puts on the superhero costume, he essentially turns himself into Bugs Bunny and then starts to operate on brain logic. No longer a human being, but representative of truth, justice, and the American way. I'm starting to approach superheroes like cartoons or anthros, but with an in-universe on-off switch. They turn their connection to reality off, and then become the physical representation of a mental theme. While superhero stories have a nice in-universe explanation why heroes don't do their heroics in their civilian clothes, to keep their identity a secret for bad guys, but it is telling to me that there's just something about superheroic deeds that just feel better and more natural when it's done with someone who looks a little abstract, a little weird. A look that's more artificially constructed, like a cartoon. And yes, with in-universe logic attached to it too. Superhero suits are often practical, with belts and armor and gadgets. Unless the superhero is a girl, then they have to do with magical swimsuit equipment. This is a nice, perfect blend between realistic logic that smoothly covers up the more abstract cartoon logic behind it. Bending reality just feels more natural when it's done by someone looking more stylized. As if the costumes are an on-off switch between when you need to approach the material from a realistic perspective or from a brain perspective. Now he's Bruce Wayne, wealthy man who needs to socialize to find information and hit the gym to keep up physical appearances, and now he's Batman, the representative of vengeance, of justice, of darkness, just like how Bugs Bunny represents a state of mind. Dark and brooding Bugs Bunny, Bugs Bat Bunny. Another effect of abstracting visuals can have on narrative is as a buffer, a way to talk about dangerous and uncomfortable concepts sideways. Can't go around attacking communism when Stalin's still around sending assassins all around, so you use stalking animals. When politics get involved, it gives the story more credibility and weight, but it can also get your audience to fly off the tracks and miss the point. That's where horror movies, science fiction, more abstract stuff comes in. Explore the human condition, the situation, the danger, the emotions, without having politics steal away the focus. Any kind of sensitive topic, really. I always liked the robotization machine from Sonic CTM as an incredible story potential, being turned into robots, characters dealing with losing their mind, losing control of their body. It can be an allegory to so many things, from dementia, puberty, dark stuff, but presented in a kid-friendly way. This is one of the strong narrative potentials cartoons can have, one criminally underused because abstracting human is still considered to be a downgrade of intelligence somehow, that it's made for children. You're simplifying the world, and that's true, but sometimes you need a more simple world in order to tell a complicated story, to stay focused. You sidestep whatever sensitive elements can trigger you by using symbolism, not to mention with the abstract visuals, you jump in way faster. You can immediately jump to the super stuff, the ghosts, the superheroes, the personalities, crazy stuff, and go and explore it without having to waste enormous amounts of time and energy to just make it feel real in the real world. Silly realistic superhero movies always needing their damn origin stories. Cartoons don't give a damn. Batman, Joker, go for it. I don't need to see a normal guy becoming normal Joker. They represent for something. They represent an attitude, an energy, a danger. Just immediately unleash it to the world and let's explore what it does instead of wasting time just to show me how normal they were before they became interesting. Not that I necessarily hate all slow-moving context-building starts, necessarily. It works in some movies, but, it's nice to have the option to just, sometimes dive right in. There's potential to dive in deeper, go harder, go further, when you explore something purely as a thought experiment, rather than worry about how realistic it is. Heck, there's that Doc Walker video recently, Is Weird to the New Brilliant, where he talks about weird-looking cartoons being the smarter satire these days. It kind of reminds me of this. Southpark can take apart pop culture, take apart news articles, take away the thoughts and emotions of the folk on the streets, and reassemble all those pieces in one crazy cartoon where any news article or social concept can be explored deeper than ever before. The best part of Southpark is that it's, while being satire, it can also finally cross the hurdle of the eternal. It's a cartoon, it shouldn't deal with rape, racism, sexism, real emotions. The very act that having those cute, happy cartoon characters deal with darker and serious stuff is right at the core of the show's identity and primary appeal. That's the joke, that's why it's funny. Haha, 8-year-old boy who looks like Charlie Brown is talking about dildos and lesbians. But then, secretly, get past that initial haha, it's just a joke phase and pay closer attention and you'll find Southpark ending up genuinely tackling and commentating on darker stuff that cartoons are usually not allowed to do so. Heck, real fiction or real talks are even allowed to do so. It's having its cake and eating it too. Built-in defense that it's overstepping its boundaries is all a joke. Don't worry about it. It's not serious. That's a joke. Relax, buddy. And then yet, it puts itself into a position where it can comfortably tackle any and all subjects. While I'm personally not a super big fan of Southpark, it is one of the more glorious examples of what potential animation and cartoons could have when we finally stop having it held hostage by the children all the time. It's especially the abstract that can tackle dangerous and sensitive topics because it can use symbolism, allegories, metaphors much more naturally to sidestep emotional landmines and still tackle the core of the concept. And by being detached from reality, it puts us in a position where we can really explore what it is as a concept, as an idea, as a fear we have, rather than just whether it is. And sometimes having a kid interact with a children's version of the insane world makes way more sense and captures the truth way closer than any dry academic report ever could. Just because cartoons operate on dream logic doesn't mean it can't contain serious and adult material. People can dream about violence, people dream about sex, people dream about fear. Dreams can become nightmares. Disconnecting those from a reality context doesn't always make this more innocent. It can also make it more terrifying and intense as well. And sometimes you might even be able to understand them even better. Cartoons, anthros, abstractions. Man, there's several more trains of thoughts I had besides this, but this video is becoming bloated as it is, so I guess I'll stop right here. Hopefully I get to some of the things I'm skipping now in the following conversation in a future video when we'll be talking more specifically about anthros themselves. This video was more about setting up the foundation for that. So, you peeps got any thoughts, complaints, objections, questions, let me know in the comments and we might work them into the next video, which may take a while to make because I'll be going on vacation by the end of September and I'm trying to get an animation finished by that time too, so we'll see. I suppose it might be a good thing I can spend my time floating in a swimming pool on Mallorca thinking about this stuff. So, see you all next time. Bye-bye.